Welcome everyone to Gems from the Wisdom Traditions, a conversation circle in which each of us has a chance to share our life wisdom from whatever tradition we may hail. I'd like to start out with a quote from Pico della Mirandola, a Renaissance thinker, on our topic of karma as soul education, who says, "Thou mayest sculpt thyself into whatever shape thou dost prefer," which seems very akin to the reading that Diana just gave us on conscious endeavor, which allows us to paint the very atmosphere in which we live and breathe, and what kind of karmic effects come from that. Our speaker for today is a longtime favorite of ours here at GEMS, Ramdas. He's a religious studies professor at UH, and he speaks from the tradition of Hinduism and the Vaishnavite tradition of Hinduism in particular, where he was a sadhu in India for almost a decade. And so I would love to hand this over to Ramdas for our conversation on karma as soul education.
Great. Renee, thank you, and welcome to everyone. And I'm going to talk about the various types of karma, and then I'll focus on one. And please feel free to interrupt me to ask questions whenever you wish. So within the Indian tradition, there's basically three concepts of karma. The Jains have a concept where karma is actually a substance, kind of like this microscopic substance that attaches itself to the soul every time you act. And so the goal is to kind of get rid of it. In the Buddhist tradition, karma is a consequence of primarily intention, why you do what you do, why you think what you think, why you say what you say, has a strong influence on the concept of karma. There are other elements, but the issue of intention is often the dominant one that is discussed in the Buddhist tradition. In the Hindu tradition, there's the idea of intention, the idea of knowledge behind the action, and the consequences of the action. All of those kind of interact. And so that's what I'm going to be talking about. Because we're dealing with the issue of soul, and nearly all the schools of the Hindu tradition have a concept of soul. Not all the schools of the Buddhist tradition have that concept. So anyway, in my own tradition, which is the Ramananda Sampradaya, it's a Vaishnava tradition, shares a lot of commonality with other schools. But basically, we see karma involved in, we have three bodies. There's a physical body, and it's referred to as the astula sharira, or the gross body. Then we have the subtle body, and that's the Sanskrit of that is sukshma sharira. That's a literal translation, subtle body. And then the causal body. And the causal body is simply the last body before the body dissolves and the soul merges with the divine. So it is in the subtle body that we act, we do, we think, we speak. But the effects of it are all on the subtle body. And the subtle body is where our karma, the karma book, is stored. So if you're at the university and you take a class, the consequences of how you do on that class is on your transcript, and the transcript is stored with the administration. And so your transcript changes as you go through various classes, and your transcript determines how you're going to experience subsequent semesters, what you can take, what you need to take, et cetera, et cetera. Similarly, your body of karma, your book of karma, influences what you're going to be doing. And just like, and so I take this semester, and then at summer school, or during the summer, I decide based on what I've done this semester, what I'm going to take next semester. In the same way, many Hindus believe that when you leave your physical body, then you can see what you have done, you can see your karma, and then you make choices as far as where you're going to be born to learn the things that you need to learn. But that's all in the subtle body. So, and when we do actions, that are unconscious, that are hurtful, that are violent, that are non-truthful, that are not compassionate, etc., etc. Those are negative karma. And what they do is they block the light of the soul. And so the soul, because you have those two bodies, the subtle body and the causal body, covering the soul and the physical body. But when the light of when your negative karma functions, then you're blocking it, and because it is in your subtle body where that light can come through. When I do good actions, on the other hand, it helps to kind of clear away. And this is similar to the Jain concept of matter covering, but it's in the Hindu concept, it's not actually matter. It's just a blockage that comes from ignorance of what we do. And ignorance is seen as a really big obstacle, because when I do something that is wrong, I don't do it because I'm evil. I do it because I'm ignorant of the consequences of the actions on others. And so ignorance becomes the major obstacle. So the seeking of wisdom is a really important process so that I can stop doing negative things that darken the subtle body, and therefore do not let the light of my consciousness shine through. But as I learn and as I grow and as I take teachings and as I do practices, then I begin to understand what are my actions? What does it mean to be good? What are the positive things? What are the things that I do wrong that hurt others, etc.? And so then I begin to not only change my actions, but I change my intentions. And as a result of it, the consequences of those actions change as well. And so when all of those three begin to work together, then what happens is then the karma, which in the negative sense was blocking the light from coming through, now begins to get clear, and the subtle body allows this light to start shining. And so then how that comes in my life is I am a nicer person, I'm a more compassionate person, I'm a friendlier person, I'm a more honest person, I'm a more nonviolent person, I'm a more caring person. And so we look at those attributes and we can say, when we see those attributes in someone, then we can say, it appears, we can never know for sure what a person's karma is like, but we can say it appears from their actions that they are attempting, that their practices are such where the light of their soul is kind of influencing the conscious, what we call consciousness. So their action, they seem to be a very conscious person. Or sometimes we say they don't seem to be very conscious, right? But we can never really know, because you can meet people who seem very negative. They seem to be in a lifestyle that you would think, oh, they must have done something really bad in their last lifetime. But we can't know that. Absolutely, we cannot know that. It's just like you go to the university and you see somebody who's getting straight A's, and then you see somebody who's getting B's and C's and D's, right? And then you think, oh, well, a straight A person is smart. Until we look at what they're taking. They're taking like advanced relaxation, basket weaving 101, right? And the other person is taking theoretical physics and things that are really, really difficult, because they want to learn and they want to strive. And maybe one semester they're doing that, and the next semester they'll get B's and C's, and the next semester they'll get A's and B's, and then eventually. So that second person, while if we were to just look at them and we were thinking they must be really not very smart or not very conscious, actually they're the smarter of the two. So we cannot look at a person's life necessarily and say, I can tell what their karma is like, because I cannot do that. The one thing that I can do is I can look at myself. Am I a more loving person? Am I a compassionate person? Do I care about others, or do I think, what can I get from that person? If my focus is on what I can obtain personally from my interactions, from my thoughts, and from my words, then it's important for me to understand that the karma that I'm going to produce and that I am producing is a karma that's not going to be expanding my consciousness. It's going to be expanding my attachments to the world, my attachments to my things, and ultimately suffering. I'm going to lead to suffering. My teacher once told me, if your life is not a challenge, you're doing something wrong, right? If your life is easy, you're going downhill, right? Because it's easy to go downhill. So we always need to be challenged. We always need to work on becoming a better human being, work on becoming a more compassionate, a more truthful, a more loving, a more sincere, a wiser human being. That takes effort. And when we do those actions, it inspires us to do more. And each lifetime we improve and we move more in that direction, which means then we have more of an ability to help others. And as we know, and I think I mention this a lot to my students, is you think about, you get something to satisfy your senses, whether it's a new car or some food or some item or something, some sensual experience that you have, and it's awesome and you really like it. And it lasts for a half an hour or an hour or something, and then you think on to something else. But when you help somebody, the joy that you get from that lasts a long time. That is what we want to do. And so when our karma moves us in the direction that we find joy from helping others, or we find joy from being honest, being giving, being compassionate, being forgiving, then we can reflect upon ourselves and we say, and we can say, you know, I think I'm moving in a good direction. And that's important. And we must always work to move in that direction because we need to grow. We either grow and we die. That was another thing my teacher once told me. He said, you look at a little plant and it's growing and it's got new leaves and all these leaves are coming out. And what does that tell you? It's healthy, it's growing. And then what happens if the leaves stop and it doesn't grow any more leaves? And then here, this leaf and these two plants were growing together. And now this leaf, this one has 10 leaves and this one has 35 leaves. What does that tell you? This one is not growing. And that's it is with us. If we're not constantly learning new things, having new experiences, being challenged, as my guru would say, we're not growing. And so we have to put ourselves into a situation in life where we are challenged to grow, where we are challenged to learn new things, to open up ourselves to new understandings of life, to new approaches to life, to new people in life. So we have to, and then we start looking at the things that we are afraid of. And that is one of the best, not the best, the most difficult obstacles for our spiritual growth is fear. The worst is greed. Greed does more to destroy us karmically and spiritually than anything else. But the next is fear. Being afraid to learn, being afraid to meet somebody new, being afraid to learn new things, being afraid to grow, being afraid to move out of your comfort zone. So when I was a monk, that was the big thing we dealt with. Find out where you're comfortable and get rid of it, right? If you're comfortable, you're not doing something right. And there was a Sufi mystic, Hazrat Nizamuddin Alawiya. There's a Nizamuddin colony in Delhi where he lived in the 13th, 14th century, something like that. He says, if you're comfortable, he says, you're not growing at all. You need to be uncomfortable because you need to be stimulating yourself to grow. And as I often mention to my students, it's like if you go to the gym and you're lifting 10 pounds and it's easy, so then, well, I'll just continue to lift at 10 pounds. That's great. Well, then you're not growing. What's the purpose of doing it, right? So you go to 20 pounds, or if I want to run a half a mile, then I learn to run a mile. And when I can run a mile, then I'll run 2 miles, etc. So we know on the physical level that we need to constantly work on ourselves and push ourselves to grow. So we have to do that on the spiritual level as too, so that we can challenge ourselves to things, and once again, look at what is uncomfortable. What would be uncomfortable for me to do? Maybe that's what I need to learn how to start doing. And that will help us to cleanse the negative karma from our lives, which will then allow the light of consciousness. And we call that the awakening of consciousness. Because remember, consciousness is inside of you. Consciousness doesn't come from outside. Consciousness is within. It's our awareness that we learn. And as we become aware and alter the things that we do, then our consciousness can start to shine through. And as my consciousness shines through, I begin to see things, understand things in ways that I couldn't understand before. And then I began to realize that the desires that I had, maybe those desires were not worthwhile desires for me. And maybe that those desires were actually obstacles that were keeping me from experiencing growth and experiencing understanding. So karma is the actions, karma is the consequences of the actions, and karma is the inspiration for further actions. So I drink coffee every day and I get addicted to coffee. And so then pretty soon I can't live without it. Or I'm into sweets and I can't live without it. Or I'm into cigarettes and tobacco or whatever it is. If we become dependent in order to be happy on external things, the karma that's a consequence of those external dependencies is karma that will continue to limit the light that comes from my soul. And so we have to start looking at all of our lives, evaluating our lives and say, what is it that I can do to make me less dependent on the things, the passing things of the world, and more focused on what is essential, more focused what is real, because that's how I can learn who I am. And when I learn who I am, then I know where peace is and I know where happiness is. And as long as I'm dependent on the external things, I'm never going to know myself. I'm simply going to know my reactions to external stimuli. I'm going to know myself relative to external stimuli. So the whole process of growth then is keeping the body healthy. Go to still and moving center, right? Do your practices, get healthy, and also work on the inside. You know, so we work on the physical body. We work on the subtle body. We start trying to clean that through our thoughts, through our words, and through our actions. And then through our intentions. So first of all, we want to make our actions good, but we also want the intentions to be there, because if the intention is negative, there's not going to be much good karma coming from you can do a positive action and there might be some good karma, but if your intention is not good, then it's not going to be much good. So we wanted it, and then the consequences of my action. So I have to look at my actions, and when I do something, I have to look. I'm trying to help somebody, but is this actually really helping them? So, for example, when your child asks you, can I have this, can I have that? It's easy to just say yes. But if I have to think, if giving that to them going to help them to grow or not? And if it's not going to help them to grow, then we shouldn't just sell out and say, oh yeah, here, then don't bother me. Right? And a lot of times I think parents do that, is they give things to their kids rather than deal with their kids. I've seen it many times. Best thing that we can do is to give to our kids is love and compassion and understanding of their needs, and give them the things that will help them to grow, not that will just make them comfortable. Just like us. We shouldn't seek a life of simply physical comfort. We shouldn't encourage our kids to seek a life of simply physical comfort. We should teach our children to grow, to learn, to strive, to teach each other. We have to do that with each other. Renee.
I wanted to ask, with this idea of teaching our children, there's a phrase that suffering is the teacher. That doesn't mean that we are going to actively hope that our children, suffer. And yet, this harsh disciplinarianism probably isn't the right way either. I'm wondering if there's a way of inspiring this self-discipline that can steer them.
My daughter, when she was 14, I think, she came to me and she said, "Dad, can I do this?" She wanted to do something. I can't remember what it was. And I said, "When you get a little older." She said, "You always say that to me. When am I going to be old enough?" And I said, "When you can take responsibility for yourself." "Well, what do you mean? Do you wash your clothes? Do you make your bed? Do you earn the money to pay the rent? Do you cook the food? Right? Do you really take care of yourself? Are you ready to do all of those things?" She goes, "Maybe later." Right? Okay. So then as you become more independent, you will have more freedom. But when you're living with us, it's my job to make sure you're safe, to make sure you grow, to make sure you learn. First boy who asked her out, she was a sophomore. No, she was a sophomore. He was a senior. Asked her to the senior prom. She was like blown out. She'd never really been on a date before. So she told me, well, she told her mom, and her mom said, "Go ask your dad." And he said, "This guy wants to take me to the prom." And I said, "Okay, when am I going to meet him?" She went, "What? Why do you have to meet him?" "Because you're my favorite daughter." You think I'm going to let my daughter just go to anybody? How little do you think I think of you? You're precious to me. You're too precious for me to just let you. So if he wants to go, call him up. I'll talk with him. And eventually she realized that that was the only thing to do. So she called him up. And the first thing I said to him is, "Your dad home? Can I talk to your dad?" And we talked. "Tell me about your son." We had a great conversation. We talked for about a half an hour. And when we were done, I said, "Okay, you go out with him." Right? So she learned that my care wasn't going to prevent her from doing something, but it was going to make sure that what she did, or to do what I could to help make sure that whatever she was doing was growing for her. And I think that that's what we have to do. When we let our kids know that we will take the time and energy to care for them and teach for them, even when it's difficult for them, I think in the long run, they appreciate it. So anyway, that's what we need to do, is just to go about life with the idea that I want to grow every day. I just want to grow. I want to be closer to myself. I want to be able to see my light. And I want to be able to see other people's lights, because when I can't see my light, I can often not see the light of others as well, because I live in darkness. So then I see everybody else in darkness. The more that I live in light, the more that I can see the light shine through others as well. And isn't that beautiful, right? When we're in the company of people who know their beauty. I was going to say beautiful people. Everybody's beautiful. It's just that there's some of us that understand it, and there's a lot of us who don't understand it. So when I can appreciate someone else's beauty, which is a direct result to me of the light that is coming through them, then I begin to see beautiful things in the world. And then pretty soon my world becomes a beautiful world, rather than a world of pain and suffering. This is a world of amazing opportunities and goodness.
I see Roger's hand.
Nice to hear your wisdom. Thank you so much.
Sure.
With me nicely. I wanted to respond to Renee's question.
Uh-huh.
In a book I just read that really was terrific about a guy named Guru Singh in Los Angeles. I don't know if you ever heard of him, but he had these experiences with this incredible, I wouldn't say lost tribe, but this group who teaches their kids through passages. So I'm an old Joseph Campbell guy who I like his statement, in your darkest caves lie your greatest treasures.
Beautiful, beautiful.
But
Yeah.
instead of, as Renee was just not seriously suggesting that we get our kids into trouble so they can deal with it, this group created very difficult passages for teenagers, basically, but starting younger to train them for that, where they had to go in these challenges that were literally life-threatening, but they prepared them for it. And I think we've lost those passages, not only physically, but even metaphorically or virtually.
Yeah.
And I think that would be something to really look at. How do you train your kids to deal with life situations in an environment that is loving and safe, but a little risky, perhaps? I don't think we'd be willing to do what these people were doing, but to challenge them in ways that are much better than just competitive challenges about who you can be better than. And so I just throw that out. I thought this book was really amazing, and what these kids were able to do and accomplish just because they were getting it from a loving environment. They were what they do rather than chastised for what they did wrong.
Yeah, I think the most important thing we teach our kids is what they see, not what they hear. What we tell them is really irrelevant, because half the time they don't hear it anyway. But they watch us. They watch how we do. I remember when I was a kid, and my father, he wasn't around for the first almost 5 years of my life. And when he finally did show up, and if my brother and I said something that we lied to him about something, he would just immediately, he would go after us, right? So lying was absolutely wrong. And then I remember one day the phone rang and my dad said to my mom, "If it's so-and-so, tell him I'm not here." And I heard that and I went, "Oh, I get it. Lying is for adults," right? And that's what happens. And I realized that my dad, as really terrible as he was, he taught me an awful lot. He taught me how not to be. He taught me what not to do, because I saw the results of those actions in his own life and in his own consciousness. And then I saw my mom, who was just the opposite. And so both of my parents were awesome teachers, one teaching me what not to do and the other one teaching me what to do. And so I think that that's what we need to understand, is that our kids watch us and our kids learn from us. And so sometimes, we need to just sit down with them and say, this is what I'm doing, and these are the things that, and as you grow up, you're going to go through these things. This is maybe how you should consider dealing with those. Carolyn, you had a question.
It's really important what you're saying about cultivating good intentions and self-examination and trying to improve the qualities of your interactions with those you come into contact with, or whether regularly or once in a while. But there's also the reality that there's a lot that goes on, and a lot that can affect you, even just psychologically, that is very bad, and that we don't really have control over. So, the pandemic is just one example, but there are other things, and we're exposed to horrible things like the first act of war being to shoot a missile into a kindergarten. That's horrific, but, and there may be worse. So my question is, how do we kind of be aware of and take recognition and even try to send out good thoughts to the rest of the 8 billion others of us? But how do we really cope with, if you will, or how do we be on a path of growth and compassion when there's so much that can be affecting us that is not very nice, to put it mildly?
I was going to ask another question, but it sort of fits. It's like one of the things that I heard. Well, I loved your talk. I thought it was very clear. I really enjoyed it a lot. And you said something about how we make choices about what we experience. Now, is that like some religions believe in the Bardo, we choose what our lessons are for the next life, or things like that? And I'm wondering how you come at that. If we're looking at group consciousness and all the suffering that's going on in the world, is that something that has been consciously chosen, or how does that work?
Well, we all have to grow. And the only way we grow is by going through difficult things. And so we all need them. We need them in order to grow. If we don't have them, we won't grow. But I do believe in kind of family karma, community karma, national karma. But I don't think that ultimately ultimately we're going to experience the things we need to experience, and we're going to experience the karma that we have created, good and bad. But when we look at, and to go back to what Carolyn asked, Gandhi, perfect example. I mean, look at none of us suffer the way Gandhi suffered. And yet he found a real joy in life by his focus, and the way he treated people. And he treated people so wonderfully because he knew. And look at, he inspired Martin Luther King, he inspired Nelson Mandela, and to kind of approach it the same way. He inspired so many of us to say, well, let's change the things we can change, accept the things we can't change, and know the difference. We can't, I mean, so my students will ask me when election time comes, who are you going to vote for? And a lot of times I say, well, probably, I mean, I'll vote for, if I vote at all, I'm going to vote for somebody who I know will never get in, right? I voted for Ralph Nader, I think 3 times for president. I didn't really think he was going to make it. Right. But my vote was to just say, I don't buy either one of your, they talk about the lesser of 2 evils. Well, you're still voting for evil if you're going to vote for the lesser of 2 evils. So I choose not to do that. And people get upset at that, and they say, well, then you don't have a right to complain. And I says, yeah, I do. Right. I have a right to make a point and to say, this is the things that I think need to change. And each of us will find ways. I do it through my teaching. Different people do it through their but all of us have the ability to make the world a better place. And even if we so my teacher once, we were in the jungle of North India, staying in a little hut. We had gone to this village and they put us out in this hut in the jungle, which was awesome. And I was complaining, we were in an idyllic position, and we're complaining. And I was complaining about something. I don't remember what it was. And he said to me, he said, you really want to change the world, don't you? And I said, I want to change the world. He said, don't waste your time. You change yourself. And in the process, if you can change 12 people, you will have done more to change the world than 99 9/10% of the population. So let's just work on a few, let's just work on ourselves, and then we'll work on a few. And I think all of you have probably already changed more than 12 people, and you will continue to do that. And I think that's what we should do. And then, at the end of the day, and again, my kids would ask me what they should do when they grow up, and I told them, be happy, and don't hurt anybody, tell the truth, and be happy. Because if you're not happy, then you are going to hurt people, and you're probably not going to tell the truth. So first of all, we got to be happy. And how do we be happy? By knowing what's essential, knowing what's inside us, and enjoy it. And then we do see that suffering, Carolyn. There's obvious great suffering going on. And some of it we can do something about, and that we should try to do something about. And some of it we can't do something about. And we say, okay, well then people are going to have to learn from that. And in the meantime, I'm going to try to increase the amount of light in my life in hopes that it will spread to others, so that those that it touches will be inspired to increase the light in their lives, so it will spread. And eventually we will have a more enlightened world. But there will always be suffering, because there will always be ignorance. If we look, the world, we haven't improved as a human race. We haven't become more enlightened as a human race. We just become more technological. You read Homer, which is like almost 20, he was around 8th century BCE. And you read Homer and you read Plato, who was a little more recent, and you read like the dialogues and their history, and you realize people then were dealing with the same issues we're dealing with today, right? We haven't changed. We've just learned how to.
You know what, Ramdas? I would say that would be, there's no point in evolution. There's no soul education. But maybe if we expand,
individually, but see, Renee, each of us individually have the ability to grow. But I'm just saying, as a civilization, humanity has not become a better race of people now than it was 3,000 years ago. Individuals have. Each of us grow, each of us learn, and then eventually we get to the point where we can help those others who are starting out.
We don't crucify people anymore. We don't cut people. We don't draw and quarter people. Yeah. We don't have wars every other day to steal people's countries. We don't live in fear of death every moment. And we have evolved as societies. We are less barbarian than we were look at the Jewish people. Mm-hmm. God told them to come to the land of milk and honey. Mm-hmm. They went to Jericho and the walls came tumbling down, and he killed every person there. Man, woman, women. So I'm saying that in terms of living with each other, every time we drive down a highway, it's a blessing that we just follow the rules and don't kill each other and all these kinds.
We are blessed that we are in this situation, and that there are many people in the world who are not in that situation. Look at the Yazidi, right? What has happened to the Yazidi? What is happening to the Uyghurs in China right now? What are happening to the Falun Gong in China right now? What are happening to the Tibetan Buddhists there? We have learned how to kill millions of people, not just one or two. We kill thousands at a time. We have polluted our environment. There is more pollution now in their environment than probably in the first 2,000 years of our society. And so we actually are doing a lot to destroy. But those of us who are here, we are fortunate. We don't experience that. We can't pretend it doesn't exist. As Renee knows, I deal with poverty a lot in central India. I see suffering every day. I know what it's like. We don't see it, and so we forget that it exists. And now with the pandemic, over 200 million people have fallen into poverty who weren't in poverty prior to the pandemic. So I can't pretend that the world is a much better place now. I can say that individuals have improved. Individuals inspire us, and that's what we need to do. We need to grow as individuals, knowing that there will always be pain and suffering, but knowing at the end of the day, at least I did my part. That's how I see it.
And I would also like to say that just you giving this talk today is something that could never have happened before. And what you're doing is you're expanding on each of us in our consciousness, and we're growing because of our technology. And you read, I can't turn off stuff on YouTube and everything, giving me life lessons. That book I mentioned, there are so many of us moving in this direction, Ramdas. And
there are, and there are also many people destroying. So both exist, and I think both existed before, and I think both exist today. I love the community that is here right now, and I feel so blessed that I can, on a Saturday afternoon, turn on my computer and communicate with all of you. And that is a blessing. I know many people who don't. So I'm teaching a class on mysticism right now. And I got an email from a student from Eastern Iran. she's from Khorasan, where Sufism began. And she said, I am so interested. I've been going on the internet and I found your website. Can I sit in on your class? And I said, absolutely, you can. And she says, sometimes I can't get through because our government limits what we do. But so she has a VPN and she kind of is doing these things and she'll be on and then she gets broken off. But, and then we talk afterwards and she says, oh, she says, what you and your students are able to think about, I know very few people who are allowed to even think that way in my country, right? And then the beauty of it is she just got accepted at Notre Dame. So she's getting out of Iran, and beautiful. But, you know, I mean, and she will talk to me about the suffering. She talks to me what happens in her country when somebody says something publicly against the government, and oftentimes they get hung from a light post, right? So people and people get to see it. And she says, you can be walking down the street and there's somebody hanging, and you know.
So I'd like to step in just for a minute, if I could, and say that there's something I learned about recently. It's either positive toxicity or toxic positivity. Not sure which, but it's that thing that we have to be happy all the time. We have to cover over anything that's unpleasant. And that would be to deny compassion if we can't acknowledge the suffering.
Yeah.
So obviously,
totally
it seems to me that both Roger has made some really good points. Ramdas has made some really good points. You're more in agreement than you are apart. I did want to point to, and maybe Kirk, who's here online, might want to add on to this idea that within the Hindu tradition, we can look at this idea of the different yugas, the different ages. And we are currently, and just yesterday we passed Krishna's birthday, which marks the beginning of Kali Yuga. And that was about 5,000 years ago, a little over 5,000 years ago. And that is the period of time when it's the darkest of all the great ages. And we're going to experience the most violence, the most suffering. And then there are three other yugas, or great ages in time. And so you go from the Iron Age, or Kali Yuga, the Dark Age, and then you have the Bronze, and then the Silver, and the Golden Age. And one of the wonderful things about the universe, as the Hindus present it, is the Golden Age is the very longest one, and Kali Yuga is the very shortest. But my understanding of Kali Yuga is that in it, karma is speeded up. It's the shortest age. Things happen the most quickly. So the advantage of it is that we get to very quickly see the karmic results of our actions, so that then we can respond, make changes within perhaps that lifetime, perhaps within that year, that week, that day, that minute. And there's a blessing in that speeding up of the karmic effects coming back to us. Bob, and then maybe if Kirk did want to say something.
Well, I love that thing you just said about the age we're now in. You know, the way we think determines what we do. I mean, that's the gist of karma. You know, whatever we do has a cause and effect. And I look at karma in my own spiritual path as essentially two lessons. And I get it from the idea of karma, that there are three types of karma. There's the karma of your past lifetimes that have led to this particular rebirth, the one I'm now in. For me, whatever I did in those past lifetimes means here I am. I'm an American. I'm a white male. My parents were who they were, good, bad. Whatever I experienced is because of that karma. Here I am, 70 years old, and there's a pandemic because of that karma. That karma determines my place of birth, my time of birth. Secondly, there's the karma of my own actions. what I do in this world, what I'm doing, what I have done, what I will do, all related to, I think, my thinking. And those will all have consequences. And then third, there's what's called the storehouse karma, which means not all of the karma of my past lifetimes led to this rebirth. There's extra stuff out there. And maybe that will happen later. And the stuff I do, if I'm a really negative person and I'm very violent, some of that may come back to me in this lifetime. Some of it may come back to me in another lifetime. So those are the three types of karma. To me, there's two things you can take away from that. One, to be incredibly grateful that you're reborn as a person, as a human being. And secondly, I guess that a human being that has a religious path. I mean, those are extremely rare. It's been said that 100,000 rebirths before you become a human being. You have to be incredibly grateful because, as Ramdas says, all of the opportunities you have are because of this fortuitous rebirth as a human being. And secondly, no blame to anyone else. It's all my karma. Karma of past lifetimes, karma of this lifetime, it's all me. And so I can't blame anyone else, and I have to be grateful. If you take those two things, I think your thinking will be pretty good and have that sense, you know? So I take those two things as two lessons whenever I get really negative and say, well, why me? You know, why did my mother not do this or do this? Or, you know, how come I got a D on that class when I deserved an A? My karma. There is an easy answer. It's all because of me. And to me, karma allows you to go forward completely positive, not blaming anyone else and accepting that it's all there because of what you have done this lifetime or a past lifetime. And you don't really need to know your past lifetimes. I mean, it'll all come back to you eventually.
Yeah.
Eric?
Yeah, well, just to add to that, there was a lot there, Bob. Thank you for that. That, you know, if you find this in Hinduism and in Buddhism as well, the idea of the interdependent nature of karma and of life. Dependent origination is one of the classic teachings of Buddhism. And part of that is that at any given point in time, any action, there are innumerable interrelated and interdependent actions also going on by countless other beings, seen and unseen, who are affecting and being affected by whatever action we take. And in that sense, it's impossible unless one has completely transcended the realm in which karma operates, that one would be able to trace the particular karmic history of a given situation, right? And in that sense, also, it's a falsehood. I don't mean to negate what you just said, Bob. It's also true that we are all in this together, right? That's the fundamental teaching, that there's unity, and you know, Hinduism has this idea about the great breath. It's like everything is moving forward in unison. And so any ailment, any negative, what we would perceive as a negative situation, negative influences, difficulties, etc. Yes, we are responsible because we are part of that great breath. And that's part of the lesson of karma, that we need to accept that as being our particular, you could say, dharma or karmic inheritance for this life, to deal with it and to work through it, to learn from it, to understand it, and to transmute it into learning and love. And that's the great lesson that the Buddha taught, you know, in the first stanzas of the Dhammapada, that hatred does not cease by hatred in this world, but by love. And there's also, just to add one more point about that. So this is because particularly for people who are going through tremendous suffering, which we are not, personally, we wouldn't want to impose on them the idea that somehow they are personally responsible for everything that that they're going through, all the suffering they're going through, but they are, it's part of their inheritance in this life to work through those situations that they found themselves in. Not that they themselves as a, separate human being somehow created it. So, but they're experiencing the karmic wave of the times, and we can assist them by empathizing with them, by trying to relieve that suffering in whatever way we can, and so on. But just one last point, that it's said that one of the there's two ways to shift that karmic inheritance that we may be experiencing in a given life. This is really important because you were mentioning that there's this vast load of karma which we may not be experiencing right now, but it's there because we've all been through many lives. Why isn't it manifesting in this life? And because there isn't an appropriate instrument, there isn't an appropriate situation for it to manifest. But that the two ways that we can alter the karmic field in which we're operating has to do with thought, the intensity of thought, because that is the primary generator. And I think Ramdas was really pointing this out very beautifully about how through our thoughts, words, and actions, we're actually either creating obstructions for the soul to manifest, or we're allowing, you could say, this greater karmic heritage, the beneficent heritage that we all have, to manifest. And so it's the power of the thought, So it's changing one's thought, changing one's identity, one's motive, etc. It's going to have the most effect, and the power of a vow that
Yes.
by dedicating oneself to the good of others, and is with as pure a motive as one can, that also has this clearing effect and altering effect in terms of the karma that's going to manifest in a given life.
Very beautiful. Thank you, Kirk. That was clarifying.
If I could just add one more thing about, unless someone else wants to speak about Kali Yuga, that it's the age of black with horrors, in the sense that truth is made to look like untruth, and untruth is made to look like truth. So it's the inversion of everything, which we're seeing that so clearly now manifest politically worldwide. Untruth made to look like truth. That wealth becomes considered the basis of wisdom. Someone who's very wealthy, well, there's a wise person, right? And also somehow of purity, that they've achieved that wealth because they're a better human being in some way. And then this whole sort of inversion about relationships, that those who actually should be leading are not leading, those who shouldn't really be leading are now leading, and on and on. So it's this that idea that everything gets inverted. Dharma looks like adharma, and vice versa.
Yeah, inversion. Yeah, thank you. Robert?
I wondered, Ramdas, if you could just summarize or restate how karma is the basis of altruism.
Sure. If I understand that my actions affect the entire world, and it's my world, right? So if I do things that are good, so for example, I go out and I plant a good garden, and I don't put poisons in it. I use organic things, and I really nurture it, and I go out and I talk to my plants. That's benefiting me, right? When I teach my class, if I teach students in ways that they become more understanding of themselves, they become happier. So I'm around happier people, right? So everything that I do to make my world a better place makes it easier for me to live. So in essence, we are creating our own worlds, right? And I mean, I think I think Roger is a good example of somebody who has created his own world, and he does a beautiful job of it, right? And I mean, his forgiveness project, he enjoys what he's doing because it improves life, but he's doing it for himself. All of us are doing what we're doing for ourselves. I mean, I know Roger enough to know that he and I think are probably the same about 99% of the things that we discuss. But I think that we have to understand that ultimately it is my world. It's my world and I'm creating it. It's because of my world that all of you are now a part of my world. And what a beautiful world to be in, right? Nobody's shooting at me. And as you know, Roger, there are people who are afraid to be shot every day, right?
Yeah.
People who are afraid that are going to die every day from starvation or whatever. Think of how blessed we are. So we have chosen to make a better world for ourselves in a decent way. And that's what is important. We have chosen to make a better world for ourselves by making the world a better place. A lot of people do it by just making a lot of money so they can have a more sensual world, not a better world, but they think it's better. It's just simply more sensual, right? But we have chosen by being here and the kind of people that I know you are, to really make the world a better place. And so we can go to bed at night thinking, wow, today was beautiful.
Ramdas, Ramdas, I wanted to ask you, you told me a really beautiful story about a young woman from France that you met on your travels and what it taught you about not judging others' karma. And I thought that might be a nice way for us to close.
Okay, so I had been in India, I had been a monk for maybe 2 or 3 years at the time. And I had met this French girl who was a heroin addict. And she would associate with some of the people that I knew, and she would hang out at certain holy sites because there was drugs there. And whenever I saw her, she was stoned. And I remember thinking at one point, wow, her life's over. She has destroyed herself, her body. I mean, I thought she would die within a year or two just from how unhealthy she was from her addiction. And I remember thinking, I hope she goes soon so that she can come back into a new life and maybe do better, right? And then I didn't see her. And then I didn't see her for about 3 or 4 years, maybe with almost 5 years. And then one day I was at this holy festival and this beautiful light person, once again, beauty, I'm talking about the light that was shining with her. She was wearing a white sari and she walked up to me and she bowed and she said, "Hi, Ramdas." And I went, "Do I know you?" And she told me her name and I realized it was this French girl. And shortly after I last seen her, she had met a teacher and her teacher had helped her to get her act together. And she committed to a set of practices and he totally changed her life. And now she was this like amazing, full of light being, right? Who I had kissed off. I decided, no, she's not going to do anything. And it forced me to think, wow, I had made such a judgment about her and look at her now. And I think that's what so when I'm at the prison, when I used to go to the prison and I would meet these people, I would remember her and I would say, these people have the potential of being just like her. They just need a shot. And I would treat them that way rather than saying, yeah, what are you, you're a convict and you're going to be back here again and I don't have to pay you a lot of attention. I saw all of them as her, as potentially her. And she really, I still remember her. She changed my life.
I really appreciate the fact that this idea of cleansing the inner body, subtle body, so that the light can shine through. And also, to appreciate the difficulties and stresses that we go through, that realize this is good karma.
Yeah.
Because it's from this that we can learn. And that means that the more challenging any relationship is in terms of evoking our affection and compassion, then that's a good deal, you know?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
challenges us to release the light. So just, those are a few things that I got from you, and I thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thanks so
everyone.
much, Ramdas. That was
Thank you.
terrific. Thank you for a wonderful conversation.
Thank you, and thank you for your participation.
you.
Very important.
Aloha.